Breaking tonight, one of the last living bridges between Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s balcony in Memphis and Barack Obama's White House is gone. The Rev. Jesse Louis Jackson, son of a teenage mother in Jim Crow, South Carolina, protégé of Dr. King, presidential contender, and architect of the Rainbow Coalition, has died at 84. For 6 decades, when America talked about race, power, and justice, his voice was in the room, at the march, or on the ballot. Now that voice is silent. The question isn't just how we remember him. It's this. In a country this divided, with voting rights under pressure and a new generation that barely remembers the civil rights, who speaks with that kind of moral thunder now? And what happens to American politics when a pathfinder like Jesse Jackson is no longer here to push it? The Rev. Jesse Louis Jackson died Tuesday morning at age 84, surrounded by his family, according to his organization, the Rainbow Push Coalition. In recent months, Jackson had been hospitalized and under observation for progressive supranuclear palsy, a serious neurological condition. His son confirmed his death, saying the family was by his side in his final hours. Rainbow Push called him a tireless change agent whose work for justice, equality, and human rights helped shape a global movement. They highlighted his presidential campaigns in the 1980s and his efforts to register millions of new voters as part of his life's mission. Jackson was born to a teenage, unwed mother in Greenville, South Carolina, in the brutal segregation of the Jim Crow era. From that beginning, he rose to become a towering civil rights leader and a political force who twice ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. In the 1960s, he served as a close aide to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., organizing economic boycotts and mobilizing black communities. He was present in Memphis in 1968 when King was assassinated, one of the last to see him alive on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. After King's death, Jackson emerged as one of the most visible and controversial heirs to the civil rights mantle. Some of King's closest aides thought Jackson was too brash, too willing to step into the spotlight. Others saw him as the movement's necessary evolution. Through his Rainbow Coalition, Jackson worked to unite Black, white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, and LGBTQ communities. "Our nation is a rainbow," he said. "Red, yellow, brown. Black and white, and we're all precious in God's sight." Those ideas helped push the Democratic Party toward a more multiracial, progressive identity long before Barack Obama hit the national stage. Commentators often called Jackson an American original hot preacher, activist, negotiator, and politician rolled into one. His 1984 and 1988 presidential bids electrified Black America and stunned observers as he drew significant white support as well. Long before Obama, Jesse Jackson showed what a black national candidate could do in a country still wrestling with its own racism. His death closes a chapter in American history that runs from Selma's bridges and Memphis balcony straight through to today's battles over voting, policing, and representation. But history isn't just about dates, it's about impact. So what did Jesse Jackson actually change, and what do we lose now that he's gone? To understand Jesse Jackson, you have to start with the odds against him. A black child born out of wedlock in the Jim Crow South was not supposed to end up advising presidents, reshaping political parties, and standing on world stages. The system was built to keep him invisible. Instead, Jackson spent his life forcing America to look at people it preferred not to see: sanitation workers, poor families, disenfranchised voters, black youth labeled as problems instead of as potential. He turned their stories into a national mirror. As a young man working alongside Dr. King, Jackson learned that civil rights weren't only about lunch counters and buses. They were about economic justice, jobs, boycotts, and corporate accountability. That focus on money and power would define much of his later activism. After King's assassination, many wondered who, if anyone, could pick up the mantle. Jackson didn't inherit King's role. No one could. But he created his own lane. Part pulpit, part picket line, part campaign trail. In Chicago, he built organizations like Operation PUSH and later Rainbow Push, blending preaching with policy demands. He didn't just ask for sympathy. He demanded contracts, investment, and representation from corporations and politicians. This approach blurred lines. Was he a pastor, an activist, a lobbyist, a politician? The answer was yes to all of it. That made him powerful, but it also made him a target for criticism from both the left and the right. To some old guard civil rights leaders, he looked too eager for cameras. To conservative critics, he was a professional agitator. To many in struggling communities, he was one of the few national figures who actually showed up. His presidential campaigns in 1984 and 1988 were watershed moments. At a time when many insiders saw black candidates as symbolic, he ran to win and came closer than the political establishment expected. He brought a new language into the mainstream political arena. "Keep hope alive," he thundered, framing politics not just as policy but as a moral fight over whose pain counted. That moral language mattered. It helped normalize the idea that poor people, immigrants, farm workers, and LGBTQ communities all belonged in the same conversation about justice. That was radical for the 1980s Democratic Party. Jackson's Rainbow Coalition wasn't just a slogan. It was a strategy to unite groups that the old order had successfully kept in separate lanes: black versus white, Rust Belt versus inner city, social issues versus economic issues. That strategy paved the way for later candidates, from Bill Clinton as multicultural conventions to Barack Obama as Big Tent coalition. In many ways, Jackson tested the script Obama would later perfect. But unlike Obama, Jackson had to run as an outsider. He wasn't the safe choice a party elite could easily sell to nervous swing voters. He was the one pushing the party from below, not invited to the table until he brought his own chair. His strength was also his weakness. His uncompromising rhetoric on race and inequality inspired millions, but also scared some moderates and corporate donors who preferred polite, quiet negotiations. Over time, Jackson became a kind of moral weather vane. When a crisis hit, a police shooting, an international hostage crisis, an election dispute, networks and communities looked for his reaction. He was a human barometer of outrage and hope. He negotiated releases of Americans held abroad. He marched for workers' rights. He showed up at strikes, protests, and vigils that rarely saw national leaders on the ground. Those moments didn't always make headlines, but they made him part of local memories. Of course, his life wasn't free of controversy. He faced criticism over remarks and personal decisions, and some younger activists saw him as part of an older generation that didn't always understand new movements like Black Lives Matter. That generational divide is real. Today's activists often organize horizontally on social media without a single spokesman. Jackson came from an era of singular leaders and mass rallies. The methods changed, but many of the core demands did not. His passing forces a hard question. In a leaderless-looking age, do we lose something when figures like Jackson disappear? Does moral pressure carry less weight when it's 1,000 tweets instead of one unforgettable speech? At the same time, Jackson spent much of his last decades trying to lift up others, not just himself. Through Rainbow PUSH and voter registration drives, he focused on building capacity, not just building a brand. That legacy shows up every election cycle. When you see large black and brown turnouts in key states, when you see grassroots voter registration efforts, you're seeing echoes of projects Jackson helped pioneer. Politically, he helped pull the Democratic Party toward a more liberal stance on civil rights, economic justice, and inclusion. Even those who opposed him ended up adopting some of his language and priorities. Think about it this way. Without Jackson's Rainbow Coalition in the 1980s, it's hard to imagine an Obama coalition in 2008. One made it conceivable, the other made it reality. They're chapters in the same long story. And that story is not just about race. It's about who counts in American politics. Whether poor people, marginalized groups, and new voters are simply demographics or actual partners in power. Jackson spent his life pushing for the second. In his later years, as illness slowed him physically, he remained a symbol. Seeing him in a wheelchair at rallies was itself a message. The struggle doesn't end when your body weakens. The baton has to be passed, not dropped. Now that he's gone, the baton is fully in others' hands. The question is whether anyone will carry it with the same mix of faith, strategy, and sheer stamina that defined Jackson's public life. We also have to be honest. America in 2026 is not the America of 1968 or 1984. The fights are more complex, the divisions more fragmented, the media environment more chaotic. A single voice has less control, but that doesn't make moral leadership less necessary. If anything, it makes it more necessary. In a time when lies spread faster than facts and cynicism is cheap, figures who can tie politics back to moral questions, who suffers, who benefits, who's invisible, are rare. Jackson was one of them. His death also highlights a broader shift. The greatest generation of civil rights leaders is leaving the stage. King, Abernathy, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, now Jackson. The generation that faced dogs and fire hoses is nearly gone. What remains is their blueprint. March, organize, vote, negotiate, pressure. Jackson used all of those tools, sometimes controversially, but always in service of a larger idea, that America could be better than its history. For his critics, especially on the right, he was often caricatured as a race hustler or relic. But that caricature rarely engaged with the actual changes he pushed. Corporate hiring shifts, voter registration booms, international mediations. For many Black Americans, he was flawed but familiar, like a persistent uncle who always showed up to fight with you at City Hall, even if you didn't always agree with his style. That presence built a deep reservoir of loyalty. For young activists today, his legacy is both inspiration and warning. Inspiration, because he proved you can push from outside and still change the inside. Warning, because he shows how quickly the system can move on, turning yesterday's firebrand into today's memory. So what do we lose with Jesse Jackson's death? We lose a living witness to some of America's darkest and brightest moments. We lose a voice that could connect Selma to Ferguson, Memphis to Minneapolis, sermons to Senate races. We also lose a certain kind of courage, the willingness to run and lose a presidential race not just for yourself, but to prove that your community, your coalition, deserved to be counted. That risk changed what was thinkable for those who came after. And we lose a preacher who never stopped calling America back to its own ideals, even when it didn't want to hear it. His sermons were political, and his politics were spiritual, in ways that made some uncomfortable and others feel seen. But we don't just lose things, we also inherit things. We inherit the idea that coalitions can stretch across race, class, and identity lines. We inherit the demand that voting is not a privilege, but a right that must be defended every cycle. We inherit the uncomfortable truth that change almost never comes neatly or from perfect people. It comes from flawed humans pushing, arguing, and sometimes failing in public. Jackson did all of that, and he kept getting back up. In an age when many people are afraid to say the wrong thing on camera, his generation was often willing to say the hard thing on camera. That doesn't mean they were always right, but it does mean they didn't confuse politeness with justice. So as we process the headline Jesse Jackson, dead at 84, we should also process the question it leaves behind. Who is building the next moral coalition now? Who is knocking on doors, registering voters, confronting CEOs, and facing down presidents with a preacher's fearlessness? Because the issues he fought, voting rights, poverty, racism, war, and peace, haven't gone anywhere. They've just changed form. New voter suppression laws instead of literacy tests. Social media hate instead of Jim Crow signage. Mass incarceration instead of open segregation. Jackson's death is not the end of an era because the era never really ended. The battles he fought moved from lunch counters to legislatures, from buses to algorithms. The question is whether today's leaders will connect those dots with the same urgency. For those who disliked Jesse Jackson, his passing may feel like the closing of a chapter they were ready to move on from. For those who loved him, it feels like losing a compass. For history, it is a reminder that progress is carried by people who are now leaving us. In the end, Jesse Jackson was exactly what one pundit called him, an American original. You didn't have to agree with him to recognize that he expanded the space of what was possible for Black leaders, for poor communities, and for rainbow coalitions in American politics. As we say goodbye, the most honest tribute isn't just to praise him. It's to ask ourselves what work he leaves unfinished, and whether we are willing to keep hope alive when it's our turn at the microphone, the ballot, or the picket line. History will argue over his flaws and his legacy, as it does with every major figure. But no serious account of modern America can skip over his name. He was there on the balcony, in the pulpit, on the ballot, in the streets. The Rev. Jesse Louis Jackson is gone. The conditions that created him are not. The search for leaders who can speak across lines of race, class, and faith is very much alive. The question is whether this generation will answer that call the way he did. From a teenage mother's home in Greenville to the balcony in Memphis to the presidential debate stage, his life was a long argument with America about what it could be. That argument does not end with his death unless we let it. This is U.S Media Power, honoring a pathfinder and asking what paths we choose now.
If you believe stories like his still matter for where this country is heading, stay with us. Subscribe, share this video, and let us know in the comments.
What does Jesse Jackson mean to you?
He means justice and hope.
We try to touch now. Who carries it forward?